The backdrop from yesterday, it can't be left in there.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was going to have later. I noticed that. It's on my mind.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nasta Prayeshu Abhadresu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Sloke Bhaktir Bhaivati Naistiki Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 2 Cosmic Manifestation Chapter 9 Chapter 2 answers by citing the Lord's version of Chapter 9, Canto 2, Chapter 9. Answers by citing the Lord's version. We just finished the Chatur, the 4 slokas spoken in summary by Lord Krishna himself to Lord Brahma, the beginning of creation, which is the essence of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And yesterday's verse explained how Krishna benedicted Brahma just to follow the conclusions with a fixed concentration and that no pride would disturb him, neither in the partial nor the final devastation, because pride always comes before the fall. So we have to be very careful no matter who we are, deva or man, or asura. As soon as there's pride, then very soon, we'll have to learn to give that up. So today is text number 38. Please repeat. Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari.
Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari.
Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari.
Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano. Janana parameshtinam. Pashyatastashyatad rupam. Atmananyarunadari. Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari.
Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari.
Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari.
Shri Sukavacha.
Shri Sukavacha.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Sampradeshaivam ajano.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Jananam parameshtinam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Pashyatastashyatad rupam.
Atmananyarunadari.
Atmananyarunadari. Uvacha
Sampradishyavam adano
Sampradishyavam adano
Dhanam paramestitam
Jnanam paramestitam Pasyatastasya rupam Atmananaryanari. Is that a U in the middle word in the last line? A U or a V? No, you're not. No, you're not. Okay. Shri Sukovacha Sampradishya Yaivam Ajano Jananam Paramestitinam Pasyatastasya rupam Atmano naroinadari.
Shri Sukovacha.
Shri Sukovacha.
Shri Sukadeva Goswami said.
Shri Sukadeva Goswami said.
Sampadishya. Fully instructing Brahmaji. Evam. Thus. Ajanaha. The Supreme Lord. Janana. Of the living entity. Parameshtina. Unto the Supreme Leader. Brahma. Pashyataha. While he was seeing. Tasya. His. Tatrupam. That transcendental form. Atmanaha. Of the Absolute. Inyarunat. Disappeared. Hari. The Lord, the personality of Godhead. Sukadeva Goswami said to Maharaj Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, after being seen in his transcendental form, instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entities, disappeared. Please repeat. Sukadeva Goswami said to Maharaj Parikshit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari, after being seen in his transcendental form, instructing Brahmaji, the leader of the living entity, disappeared. Srila Prabhupada's divine purport. In this verse, it is clearly mentioned that the Lord is Ajanaha, or the Supreme Person, and that he was showing his transcendental form, Atmano Rupam, to Brahmaji, while instructing him in the summarization of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 verses. He is Ajanaha, of the Supreme Person, amongst Jananam, for all persons. All living entities are individual persons, and amongst all such persons, Lord Hari is supreme. It's confirmed in the Shruti mantra, Nitya Nityananam Chaitanas Chaitananam. So there's no place for impersonal features. There is no place for impersonal features in the transcendental world. As there are impersonal features in the material world. Whenever there is chaitana or knowledge, the personal features come in. In the spiritual world, everything is full of knowledge. And therefore, everything is in the transcendental world. The land, the water, the tree, the mountain, the river, the man, the animal, the bird, everything is in the same quality. Namely, Chaitanya, knowledge. And therefore, everything there is individual and personal. Srimad Bhagavatam gives us this information. It's the supreme Vedic literature. And it was personally instructed by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to Brahmaji, so the leader of the living entities might broadcast the message to all in the universe in order to teach the supreme knowledge of Bhakti Yoga. Brahmaji, in his turn, instructed Narada, his beloved son, the same message of Srimad Bhagavatam. And Narada, in turn, taught the same to Vyasadeva, who again taught it to Sukadeva Goswami. Through Sukadeva Goswami's grace, and by the mercy of Maharaj Parikshit, we are all given Srimad Bhagavatam perpetually to learn the science of the absolute personality of Godhead, Lord Krishna. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport to the 38th sloka, 2nd chapter. 9th chapter, answers by citing the Lord version, 2nd canto.
That was the whole purport?
Yes, one big paragraph. The text number 38. Om Ganat Kimirandasya Ginanjana Shalakaya Kakshun Militam Yena Tadmai Shri Gurave Namaha Tadmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. I offer my obeisances unto the lotus feet of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who has opened my eyes, although they were shut by the darkness of ignorance. Wamo Rupa Goswami Prabhupada, who has established within the material world the mission to fulfill the desire of Lord Chaitanya, give me shelter under His lotus feet. So Srila Prabhupada is accomplishing his mission through his purport. He is instructing humanity and bringing us all to the transcendental platform whereby we can actually gain transcendental knowledge. If he didn't have the potency, of course, it wouldn't be possible. But because Srila Prabhupada was born for that mission, but like so many of the Lord's associates, the Lord turns it into a grand pastime, a story to glorify His devotees. We see that happening in the lives of all great devotees, even in the lives of powerful devas. All those affiliated with Vishnu, even the whole creation, of course, is affiliated with Vishnu. As he pointed out in the Chatur Sloka, that which appears to be separate is simply an illusion. So we see even the kings of the Asuras, Hiranyakashipu, Hiranyaksha, they were very much in relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But there's nothing out of relationship with Him. But without transcendental knowledge, then only the modes of this material nature inflict the living entity or move the living entity. They bond us up, the famous example being like ropes bonding up a person. You know, we become bound up and there's no possibility of getting free. These modes of passion and ignorance, tamas and rajas and sattva, they bond us up in a particular type of psychic mentality, and there's no escaping it. There's actually no possibility of escaping it. It's the Lord's divine energy. It's Mahamaya. We simply do not possess the strength to escape it. It's impossible. We just are too infinitesimal, too small to overcome the Lord's mind. But by the Lord's grace, it all becomes possible. So the Lord utilizes this Maya and His Yoga Maya, His spiritual Maya, to create pastimes. And He does that for His devotees. For example, our Srila Prabhupada. You know, Srila Prabhupada took his birth in a Vaishnava family. You know, his father arranged for him to learn the Mridanga drum, you know, harmonium. You know, his mother wanted him to be well educated. She wanted him to go to school like Mahatma Gandhi and, you know, become, you know, perhaps the most powerful position the Indian people had at that time was either serving within the British Raj or being an attorney, which also gave them greater possibilities of serving in the British Raj, or to actually help Indian people in dealing with the law of the land. And, you know, many of those persons, of course, became leaders in the revolutionary movement. So that's what Srila Prabhupada's mother wanted for him. And, you know, he became spontaneously, as that influence of Tom was there in India, he became a follower of Mahatma Gandhi while in college. But by the arrangement of Providence, you know, Srila Prabhupada's mother passed away early. I think maybe he was 14, something like that. He was left, you know, with his father and siblings. I'm not sure if he had a brother, but he certainly had sisters. He, you know, in college, or actually due to Gandhi's movement, he didn't even accept his degree from a British college, which still exists today, a Scottish Church College, a Christian school. He didn't accept his degree as a revolt against the British government's persecution and abuse of the Indian people and the land of India, and all the inhabitants. And by the arrangement of Providence, you know, Srila Prabhupada was married, not to the girl of his liking. You know, he had some other attraction, and even considered taking a second wife because he couldn't appreciate completely the one his father chose, but submitted to his father's instruction that this would be good for his spiritual life, and you know, and accepted his wife, and actually had a child when all of a sudden his childhood friend brought him to his spiritual master. The powerful line like Acharya of the Gaudiya Math was preaching in Kolkata, and he was brought by, I think, Narendra, not Narendra Modi, but Narendra somebody. Narendra somebody, I can't remember his last name. Brought Srila Prabhupada to see Bhaktisiddhanta against his will. He had to persuade him. Srila Prabhupada had seen many sadhus. His father, fed sadhus and appreciated sadhus, and so he brought him. He didn't want to go because he had seen so many sadhus. This was just going to be another one of those sadhus. But he persuaded him to go, and Srila Prabhupada, questioned his mission, doubted his mission, argued against the ultimate validity of his mission, Bhaktisiddhanta's mission, feeling that Mahatma Gandhi's mission was more important at this time. Because who would listen to India if they were simply a colony, in the colonization of the world? What did they call that? They called that colonialization. There was so much abuse in the colonialization. The Indian government didn't take complete control of India until after the Sepoy, I think that's how they pronounce it, the Sepoy Revolution, when soldiers in the Indian army revolted, Hindus and Muslims alike, because they didn't like the way the rifles were greased with either cow fat or pig fat. And so they revolted. It turned into a big revolt that was put down within a year's time. And so at that time, India was not controlled by the British government. It was controlled by a very powerful corporation called the East-West Company.
East India Company.
Huh?
East India Company.
East India Company. And that company had hired many, many mercenaries. So these Sepoys were actually Bengalis, a lot of them, and other Indians who made up their mercenary army. And this way they basically, after taking Kolkata, or wasn't Calcutta at the time, but taking that area from the Mughal Empire, they gradually conquered the entire northern part of the Mughal Empire, Delhi itself. And then, of course, that revolution happened, and the Indian government, the British government stepped in and said, this is too dangerous for, we're going to end up losing all this because you don't have sufficient facility to control all these people in this big country. So the Indian government took it over. And sometime in the 1850s, you know the date of that? 1859 or something like that? 1859. So by 1878, they created an artificial famine by taking the plentiful food that existed in the market in India and sending it wholesale, at wholesale price. So some people got rich while others starved. They sent it wholesale to London and created an artificial famine, which this was the first time that happened. It happened every time during their rule, especially during World War II. It was a very infamous time that happened. And Prabhupada lived through that. So, I guess my point was that, Srila Prabhupada argued against Bhaktisiddhanta because, India appeared to be just another conquered country that was under the British Empire. And so who's going to listen about its religious heritage, its spirituality? These people basically just mocked it. The Muslims, the Mughal Empire, did its best to stamp it out with physical force, with the power of an army. And the British Raj, with their armies and their army of scholars, simply tried to completely undermine the Vedas and turned it into books of simply mythology, and even describing ways that were immoral for human beings to live. And they tried to turn what they considered brown people into people with British minds, who would support the British Raj, who would become British-like in thought. In many ways they were successful, but Srila Prabhupada was always in revolt against this. He stood up against it, while I'm positive many other students didn't. They wanted to become barristers. They wanted to take part in the British government, and they believed in that Christianity and secularism, or some separation of the government from religion, while the British simultaneously were using both. So Srila Prabhupada stood against it and would even argue with professors concerning the law of karma and various other doctrines of the Vedas. So Prabhupada argued like that with Bhaktisiddhanta, who ultimately defeated his argument. And Prabhupada didn't become like a materialistic person under the modes of material nature, because ultimately being controlled by Yoga Maya, the divine energy of the Lord, he could become pradless and submissive. Whereas people controlled by the modes of ignorance and passion would have just thought of ways to undermine that sadhu and find fault in him and criticize him and do whatever they could to make him and his mission look puny, insignificant, and would have probably dug in even deeper in Mahatma Gandhi's movement. But that wasn't how Srila Prabhupada. He became pradless. He saw the spiritual power of this sadhu, and he thought that now Lord Chaitanya, he had faith in Lord Chaitanya. He already had faith in Lord Chaitanya. His father was a devotee of Krishna and Srimad Mahaprabhu, Lord Chaitanya. So he already had faith in Lord Chaitanya, but he didn't see anyone who was actually able to carry out the mission of Mahaprabhu until he met Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. And then he wanted to become his disciple, but how could he do that? Bhaktisiddhanta immediately ordered him to preach in English, that would be good for him and good for the English-speaking public. So, but he was not married and had a child, and that meant he had to work. By the arrangement of Mahamaya, was given a very nice job. He became a prominent manager, and the very first pharmaceutical company in India. Something like, what are some of those big ones in the world today?
Walgreens.
No, that's a retail company. Huh? Pfizer. What's the one that everybody's always hating that makes all the insecticides? Monsanto. There's so many of them.
Bayer.
Yeah, Bayer. That's a German company.
Johnson.
Yeah, so many of them. The ones that made all those opaques, some of them being sued. So Prabhupada became a big chief manager in the very first pharmaceutical company in India, Bengal Chemicals or something like that. But by the will of providence, things didn't happen to his material advantage, and eventually, he had to become independent, had to resign from his post and develop his own independent pharmaceutical company, something like Dvibuja's Blue Boy Herb, and supported his family that way. Had more children, at least 3 sons and 2 daughters, I believe. One son, with mental health issues, who ultimately became separated from the family. Actually, you can imagine, the pain, just lost, never to be heard from again. Srila Prabhupada ended up having moved from Calcutta and to, try to become, somewhat prosperous, and had moved to Allahabad and there met the same disciples. His father, when they came at his house, his father thought they were Mayavadi sannyasis because Mayavadi sannyasis were the more prominent sannyasis in North India. But then he realized after hearing them speak that they were Vaishnavas. And when Prabhupada's father passed away, he had Prabhupada give a cow to the Gaudiya Math temple that was set up there and have a feast. Prabhupada helped set up that temple, then later he moved his family to Bombay and he did the same thing in Bombay. He helped the devotees set up a temple. He basically created a donor base and he preached to people. And so eventually he had to move back to Kolkata. By that time, Bhaktisiddhanta had passed on. Before passing on, he had ordered him just 2 weeks before to do this very same thing. He told him in the beginning, please preach this mission to the English-speaking public. And he warned him about the difficulties that would happen after he left. But after, of course, he left, the mission, the Gaudiya Math broke up as the devotees fought amongst themselves over properties. And for 10 years' time, Sridhar Maharaj lived with Prabhupada in one of his apartments. Prabhupada was thinking how to carry out his mission. He wrote the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita got stolen, got lost after he wrote it all. So many things happening, right? As I mentioned, he had to go through World War II, where there was an artificial famine created as the British again sent all the grain to the west, and the people in Bengal, especially in Kolkata, starved to death where Prabhupada lived. So he had to manage to get his family through all that, through the bombings, and through the Muslim-Hindu riots that took place after the war and after the freedom of India. All these things Prabhupada had to do. On the material platform, to carry out his swadharma, his dharma in this world, while still preparing for his Sanatana dharma. Eventually, Bhaktisiddhanta pushed him to carry out his mission. He was writing in English. All that Bhagavad Gita that was stolen was written in English. Same format that we see. So we know that all of us here know the story. So in that way, the Lord was creating this great story of this person who had to, go through the trials and tribulations of an ordinary human being. He never had a life that was just pleasurable. Sometimes people are blessed with a certain karma whereby, things are relatively peaceful and prosperous and nice. Not too many difficulties. Nice family. They have all opulences due to their good karma. Wealth, sufficient education. Nice family. Family support. No problems, practically speaking. It wasn't like that for Prabhupada. They had to suffer many things. And at the same time carry out his spiritual master's mission, which, we know how difficult that was for him. But this is Krishna's arrangement for the glory of his devotees. So that mission, as we have heard, the Srimad Bhagavatam, how it came down to human society. How Vyasadeva eventually gives it to Madhvacharya, and I think the 10th century, something like that, 10th century, and then passed on down eventually to Madhavendra Puri, to Advaita Acharya and Lord Nityananda, eventually, and to which Lord Ishwara Puri. And then Ishwara Puri, the Lord actually incarnates. Krishna incarnates again, very rare, Kali Yuga, where we get to see Krishna incarnate as Lord Chaitanya, who is imbued with the mood of Radharani, wanting to understand Radha's deep love for him. That's only once in a day of Brahma. The other Lord Chaitanya or Vaikuntha Lord Chaitanya, who are teaching the chanting of the Lord's holy names, but they're not necessarily teaching the bhakti of Radharani. Lord Chaitanya is teaching that this is the topmost path of worship, to follow in the footsteps of the damsels of Rajabhumi by always hearing and remembering about Krishna's separation. And we see that with his life. He was always hearing and chanting in separation. He was chanting these verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, and his chief associates were singing those verses to him. And he was feeling the pains of Radharani in separation. He would enter into very deep samadhi because it was real. It wasn't just theoretical, where people, scholars can take pleasure in reading these very nicely, and there are many Indian scholars who read the slokas very nicely, and they can explain, all these Sanskrit word meanings and what that verse means, and can talk about the power of the mantra, and people can learn the stories, but to actually enter into an experience where Radha and Krishna are there in the spiritual world, where you leave this world and enter into that world. That's real samadhi that was exhibited by Lord Chaitanya. Many times his disciples would have to bring him out of that samadhi because he would appear dead. They would cry over him because he looked so bad. His body just looked so horrific. I mean, we can't imagine what it looked like, when the bones are all separated and the skin is just drooping on the ground. Like one time, Jairam from New Orleans, who comes here, who owns land next to Mother Kaivalya. Jairam had an accident right by the mailbox. Not where it is now, it was a little bit closer to the pavilion. And he broke his leg and ankle in a very terrible way. And if you could have seen it at that time, it just looked horrific. I was there and he begged me, don't let my children see me. Because the children all came running and we had to keep them away. We called the ambulance and, they secured the leg in some kind of thing. They put him on a stretcher and took him away. And it took him years for them to straighten it out. They put steel rods in there. They would get infected, and they'd have to go in and redo the operation and stuff like that. So but that's how Lord Chaitanya's body, it looked terrible. And they would chant, and then Lord Chaitanya come back to life, material life, and everything would just whoosh, come back together some kind of way. And, and he would stand up in a kind of what they would call an in-between deep samadhi and external consciousness, where he would be looking around and then he would be saying, what did you do? I was with Radha and Krishna, and now you have brought me here. And gradually he would come back to external consciousness. So, that's the possibility that's coming down from Lord Chaitanya to very great stalwart devotees, like the person who wrote about Lord Chaitanya, Krishnadas Kaviraj, and his disciple Narottam Das Thakur. Narottam Das Thakur's disciple, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. My dear friend Sarbajan, who he was here during Katrina, who he's a real kirtaniya. He works in the Washington, D.C. area. Does a lot of house programs there. He comes in line from Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur. That's his family heritage. So Vishwanath Chakravarti initiated Jagannath Das Babaji Maharaj, who initiated Bhaktivinoda Thakur. And not with Diksha, but with Siksha. It was his instructing spiritual master, Jagannath Das Babaji. And from, of course, Bhaktivinoda Thakur to Gorkashore Das Babaji, but that was arranged chiefly for Bhakti Siddhanta, his son, because his son, although his son was carrying out his mission, had been instructed from the time he had appeared in this world and was an Ashtika Brahmachari, someone who had never married, was carrying out his mission. According to the tradition, he couldn't give him Diksha. So he had to have Diksha, even though he was already acting as his Siksha Guru, he needed Diksha. So he arranged for Gorkashore Das Babaji Maharaj, who didn't really have to take initiation from Bhaktivinoda Thakur because he was a Babaji. He was already a renunciant. Whereas Bhaktivinoda was still a Grahastha. But a Grahastha of fame amongst Gaudiya Vaishnavas, although he was opposed, had many enemies because he was opposed to so many misunderstandings of Lord Chaitanya's mission, which he divided into non-particular sects and pointed out or criticized their particular siddhantas or views of Lord Chaitanya's mission. And his son went on to continue that fight against these other sects to establish, the line that we know of today. Is the line of Bhaktivedanta and Saraswati Maharaj coming from Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But in Bhaktivinoda's time, he was opposed by many of those groups, such as the group that considered Lord Chaitanya's birthplace is in Navadvip, and who still exists today, and who still criticize Bhaktivinoda, along with his son, and our Srila Prabhupada, to this very day over the internet. They're still opposed because Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta and Srila Prabhupada established Lord Chaitanya's birthplace in Mayapur. There's some money involved because then it becomes a place of spiritual tourism, so to speak, or pilgrimage. So instead of people now going to Navadvip to see the birthplace of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, they go to Mayapur. So, Bhaktivinoda had to, he had to meet that opposition. And when he built the temple for Lord Chaitanya in Mayapur, he wouldn't take big donations like we all try to secure in order to propagate Prabhupada's mission. He would only take 1 rupee, which at that time had more of a value, probably like about $100 of American money today. Maybe even a little bit more, 1 rupee in those days, back in 1900, 1910, whatever it was, 1908. It was worth, had a lot more value to it, but they only take 1 rupee per person in order to build a temple. And he would even go to the door, because he went door to door to collect his money. He even went to the door of his political enemies, so to speak. Which, not only did he have spiritual enemies, so to speak, but he even had material political enemies, because he was a judge in the British Raj who sometimes had to pass sentence or judgment on Hindus, as well as Muslims. So he certainly had his material enemies too. And Bhaktisiddhanta even went a step further because he opposed the Goswamis in Vrindavan, who had a monopoly on Krishna consciousness. to the extent that they tried to kill him. They tried to have him assassinated. One time they tried to beat him up, and he had to switch his sannyasi garb with one of his grihastha disciples, who then misled the band of people trying to beat him, while Bhaktisiddhanta was able to escape as a grihastha. So Srila Prabhupada, he became glorious by carrying out the Lord's mission, despite all the opposition he had to face. And Srila Prabhupada, just like Bhaktivinoda Thakur and Bhaktisiddhanta, had to meet opposition because he took Krishna consciousness to the Western world when nobody else succeeded. Even though they had been to Germany and they had been to London, they were not successful. Special books were even composed to take to there by Bhaktisiddhanta in his printing presses. Special English books were composed and printed to take with them, and still there was no success. But Prabhupada went and became successful, and then had to bring it back, only to run into the same type of opposition of bringing Malechas and Yavanas into Hindu culture, only to what? To face it, to devalue it, to turn it into something it's not. That was their view of many of these people. They were scholars. They understood the heritage, and then were bringing people here who had ultimately tried to destroy it from their point of view. So Prabhupada had to confront that. If he didn't stand behind his disciples, what would have happened to them? There was some support from the Gaudiya Math, but ultimately no one would actually take up the role. Prabhupada had offered people to become president in India. He had tried his best to get support in many ways. We can't say there was absolutely none, but there certainly wasn't sufficient support to the extent that Srila Prabhupada had to do it alone, and then he had to ultimately invest the power of his mission just in his disciples. And as Bhaktisiddhanta attempted to do but was unsuccessful, he had to invest it ultimately in the organization of his organization, from the governing board commission down to the temple presidents and all of the rank and file devotees. That this is an organization, and this organization owns this mission and these properties, which right after he left was attacked by even his own family. That no, this belongs to our father. And in Indian courts, it had to be ultimately defeated. That no, it belongs to the organization called International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So there was an attempt to take all those properties that exist in India, namely the big temples in Mayapur, Bombay, and Vrindavan. So Srila Prabhupada had to overcome so many things, not only during his life, but after his life. And then his disciples had to meet that same opposition. To this day, we have to meet that opposition, whereby, his disciples are considered inferior to, ever powerful Gaudiya Math sannyasis, or to speak of other sannyasis from other disciplic successions. And by the arrangement of providence and Krishna, everything's coming out successful for Lord Chaitanya's movement as it continues to spread around the world. And despite whatever little glory, other lines of disciplic succession get, without a doubt, ISKCON, Prabhupada's International Society for Krishna Consciousness, has been the most successful disciplic succession and organization to take Krishna consciousness worldwide and to teach people the proper Siddhanta of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, which is our Siddhanta, the Siddhanta or the philosophical teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is taught by Srila Prabhupada. Certainly there's no one more successful than the International Society for Krishna Consciousness in doing that. And that's all to Srila Prabhupada's credit. What would Prabhupada's credit look like in the world of great people if everything would have collapsed? And simply would have become, again, some few Indian temples with, really nothing in the Western world. And then, what would Prabhupada's glory have been? Then, he was some powerful leader when he was here, he did something, but when he left, really, everything fell apart. And to this day, even some people try to say like that. But it's not true. If somebody's always looking from a negative point of view, then things may seem like that. There are some people that are unfortunate in the sense that they end up in a conflict, and then they maintain a vengeance to the extent that they can only see negative things. And many times what happens is you end up creating very bad karma for that. Or you create many offenses. Because you start to, all you can do is always conspire how to destroy something. It's very unfortunate. But somebody who's got a real positive mentality and can see the good in things can see how ISKCON is extremely successful. And it will continue to be by Lord Chaitanya's grace. We also don't want to become too proud because everything is all by Prabhupada and ISKCON's grace. It's not by our great Shakti. That's certainly true. I can speak truthfully that there are many powerful God brothers who certainly are very materially and spiritually qualified to carry on Lord Chaitanya's mission. And they're doing a wonderful job. But then, there's a lot of us who are just ordinary people. And, we're doing our best to do whatever we can in support of Lord Chaitanya's mission. But the fact of the matter is that, we wasn't imbued with a lot of material Shakti, nor spiritual Shakti. Whatever we have is just Prabhupada's grace. And it's only by Prabhupada's grace that there's, practically any success. And Prabhupada used to contribute his success to his spiritual master. And that's generally the way of the Vaishnavas. Even when they're very great, they speak like that. Because they're very humble and proudless. But the fact of the matter is that many, most of them are so qualified, and you can document that. So, anyhow, the mission of Srimad Bhagavatam, you can just imagine this great Bhagavatam. It's Prabhupada who put it into our language. How could we be here today talking about it? So it's Srila Prabhupada who he gave us this Srimad Bhagavatam. It is Krishna himself. And it's hearing this book that will take us beyond to the transcendental realm, because this realm is ultimately full of torture. Just like, again, we're involved in another political election where these people will just smear one another mercilessly. And people who were friends become enemies because they just happen to be on different political spectrums. Is that what we want in life? We're not meant for that. We're meant for being absorbed in the Bhagavatam. We don't have to go listen to all this stuff and watch all this and hear all that. We listen and hear to the Srimad Bhagavatam. That becomes our solace in life. Like Prabhupada's solace was hearing Chaitanya Charitamrita, Bhakti Siddhanta Rosa. So, that will put us on the spiritual realm. We will enter into Vaikuntha by doing so. We don't want to get, that's what ISKCON has to offer the world. We're not this or that. We're trying to be Krishna conscious, and it's taught in Srila Prabhupada's books. And that's our gift to the world. And next month is the month of Bhadra. Anyone who gives Srimad Bhagavatam during the month of Bhadra, definitely goes back home, back to God. So we should all want to give the Srimad Bhagavatam during the month of Bhadra. Our ISKCON Prabhu, certainly empowered by the Lord to distribute Prabhupada's books. He created this big distribution of Srimad Bhagavatam in the month of Bhadra. And him and his disciples and devotees in Silicon Valley, they sell more than anybody else. We usually sell 1 or 2, But then after that, the Gita Jayanti is going to be coming up for distributing the Lord's Gita during the month of December. And last year it fell on Christmas Day. So at our Los Angeles temple every year, they have Shastra Dana, or the gift of Shastra. And many people buy cases and cases of Bhagavad Gitas, and they give them out to their clients and friends, well-wishers and subordinates, students, etc. And they do a big fire while devotees chant all the slokas of the Bhagavad Gita. So we sometimes do a few more Bhagavad Gitas. We do generally a few cases of those during Puja Jayanti. But we can do more. And just, if we ever got, it's a sleeping giant, if we ever got the devotees in New Orleans riled up to distribute books, we have a sleeping giant there. Just last week I had one devotee come with his wife. I can't remember his initiated name. His legal name, his last name is Gautam. Like Gautam Rishi or something. He's Gautam, I can't remember his first name. Anyway, I know him a little bit, but, because I don't see these devotees a lot, I couldn't remember much about him. A little bit that I've been introduced to him. But I found out that back in 2015, he went to the University of UNO and ultimately got a mechanical engineering degree. And now he works at the Port Authority in New Orleans. So he was bringing his wife with him to purchase books that she's going to distribute in the park in various places. So they purchased about $160 of books. And, they were very serious about distributing Prabhupada's books. And I was thinking, wow, this is the first. We've had different devotees like Rohini and Savatara primarily in New Orleans. Not to speak of Drew Miller and Monsignor, they're in another category. But amongst the Indian devotees, Savatara and Rohini, they would distribute Prabhupada's books, but along with collecting Food for Life donations, which is a little bit different from doing what ISKCON does, which all the devotees in Silicon Valley do. They put up book tables. They go door to door, and they directly sell the books. So this devotee, when he was doing that, I was thinking in my mind, wow, this could be a start. This could be a start. If we ever got those devotees to take a weekend, even if it was just one weekend a month, to go out and distribute books, we could distribute so many cases of books that way, just by people sitting at book tables passing out cookies and selling books. Now, of course, we don't have the same advantage as LA Houston, Dallas, Vandana, because they have tons of Indian stores that will allow them to set up book tables. You know, the Vaisheshika just doesn't go to those places. You know, he goes to post offices where you have public property, and he gets permission to set up on a sidewalk. You know, you may not get permission from the Walmart, especially during the coronavirus time. Even the Salvation Army probably won't be able to set up for Christmas, you know, like they always do it all the dollar and cent stores. So, you know, but still we could find places to set up book tables. There's like 100 initiated Gaudiya Vaishnava devotees in New Orleans who have all been through Guru Kula or been through, you know, ISKCON brahmachari life, or maybe, you know, came as a grahastha some kind of way or another. But I mean, there's a lot of devotees there who, if they got into distributing books, we, you know, I'm saying we have a sleeping giant there for book distribution. And, you know, maybe this devotee will be the start of that, I'm hoping. And when they become serious about it, Vaisheshika Prabhu will come here. But not until people are serious. And he doesn't come to just people like Drew Miller and Monsignor. Because they're older devotees, they already have their way of doing it, and they're doing good enough. They don't need him, and it would just be a polite, Haribol Prabhu type of thing. And it wouldn't be, you know, actually implemented, you know, with, say, Vaisheshika Prabhu's expert in implement. Mother Kaivalya.
Maybe since Donna Keeley and Preacher Sharma Prabhu, their forte is book distribution and, you know, doing exactly what you're saying, maybe they might have some interest if we encourage them to, like, find out places in New Orleans or Hattiesburg or somewhere. I mean, if they want.
They could start setting them up, yeah. They could go into the French Quarter and actually set up a place there where we could have book tables on Canal Street. Ranganath used to sell his hats on book tables. He didn't like move around like some of the devotees, but they would set up a table, him and Prema Mayit, and stand at it just there on Canal Street by the convention center or by the that gambling place, Harris. Yeah. So the devotees could have, you know, at least 4 or 5 tables just in the French Quarter. Mother, what's her name, Bhaja Govinda, used to set it up on Decatur, just a table.
Yeah, I actually asked that question from Neil Prabhu before the pandemic started because I wanted to have a table and to set up a table and a wall for Kirtan and Harna. And he told me that it's like, I was asking him about the legal part of the issue, where can we put the tables and everything, and he said it's not very clear. What he was saying, you can just put it anywhere and wait until they chase it away. But if you want to know the legal part, he said you need to consult some lawyer or something.
Yeah, maybe before Mr. Masal passes on, that's one last thing we could have him do, because we have permission to distribute our literature and to do Harinam, but we're supposed to keep moving.
Yeah,
we're not supposed to stay in one place all the time. So like you can't just go sit in Jackson Square, although you can, and you may even get away with it, but also somebody may come and say, ask you to move on.
Actually, I also heard that on Moonwalk, you can just see, like, you know, there are many musicians.
You can, but they may ask you to move on if you create a crowd and stuff like that.
But there's so many musicians, you know, like playing on the side, when they were distributing books there or walking, and there's so many like people who are just sitting and playing music and they're not moving. So maybe we obviously will also play kirtan, so it's like.
Well, what Mr. Masal usually tells us is go and do it, and when they arrest you, then I'll get you out, and then we'll start a case. And so then we'll oppose them and get the permission of the court to go there.
It's also harder here, like in Boston, for example, it's much easier because it's like, I don't know, I noticed that maybe it's because Louisiana or something, Mississippi, it's like around here, like in like Korea or PTN, you cannot do much, like you cannot distribute books here. Right? In New Orleans, it's still like all those restrictions, you have to walk like not here, not there, only French Quarter. Like in Boston, you can do it wherever you want. Like you can just go and just do it. Like we were doing that, and even Kirtan, we were doing it one place. It was just random place we chose, and nobody was chasing us away. It just shouldn't be near the store, no, it shouldn't be near the bank, just like some some wall and you can stand there and do kirtan, and they are not chasing us away. But here, like you are doing in your readings, if you just stand even for 5 minutes, you already see them coming. It's really strange. You don't know why.
In the very beginning, when we came to New Orleans, we used to stand right in front of the department stores and do Harinam. We never moved.
Maybe
We would
she's
just
right.
stay in front of the department store. We'd go out before lunch and go out after lunch, and we would stand in front of big department stores that are no longer there. They turned them into hotels. But that's where we would stand and do Harinam.
And no permissions needed, right?
We had a court injunction in 1972, so by that time we could do that. Later they created this thing about you had to keep moving. I think it would bring too big of a crowd and people couldn't walk on the sidewalk. There's a big difference between Boston and New Orleans. New Orleans is a small city compared to Boston. Boston's a big university town.
Yeah.
And Harvard, Boston College, and MIT, so many big universities. New Orleans has universities, but we're only concentrated on the tourist section,
Yeah.
where you have a lot of international travelers. So, but there are universities, Tulane University in New Orleans, Loyola University, Southern University, just right there in New Orleans, Xavier University.
Are we allowed to distribute there?
Usually you can until they actually leave. If you want to go sit on the grounds, then you have to go get permission. That I'm coming here and I'm just going to sit and chant and give some books to the students. Sometimes you have to get permission. We've done that a lot of times at LSU, the bigger university that's in Baton Rouge. But, because we don't do it daily or even weekly or even monthly, it's just extremely infrequently now that you have to always set it up again.
Yeah.
But there's a lot that can be done, like that, to get permission to distribute all over the New Orleans area and the suburbs. To be able to go into what they call the North Shore, Slidell, Mandeville, and Covington area, are very nice areas, or into Metairie, which places would never distributed at. Metairie, Kenner, only in the city of New Orleans itself. And there, mainly in the tourist section.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, we had devotees coming, we were coming every week to do Harinam, and we were distributing some books, so I guess there are devotees who want to do it, and if you can find a legal part.
And the New Orleans devotees also do Harinam, but again, it's the French Quarter, so they are doing that, and we do distribute a few books like that. But what I was getting at is that, we don't do the book distribution table, and we don't do a major book distribution thing, where we actually get all the devotees together, and everybody, you got maybe 20 different tables out there in one weekend, and when the devotees all come back for a big feast.
But it would be nice if we wanted to do it, because it's all the devotees like Krishna, we wanted that in Mahalakshmi. It's very difficult to figure it out, because we don't know. We wanted to have a table and everything, but now and then it's pandemic thing, so.
Yeah,
But I'm just saying that the devotees
hopefully
want
next
to do
year
that.
we can start.
The devotees want to do it, that's what they want to say, so.
And y'all can maybe get together with this devotee who's also buying books and trying to do something.
Yeah. Would be nice if you can give his contact to us.
Yeah.